Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Dupuy. I have a PhD in learning disabilities. I do diagnostic evaluations, advocacy, and intervention. I'm also an adult with dyslexia and dysgraphia.
Hi, my name is Kim Sharman. I work with kids kindergarten through college, and I have ADHD myself, and I work with kids with dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD.
Okay, and today we're talking about do do evaluations sometimes miss things or get things wrong? So why don't you tell your story, Kim, about what your experience was with your daughter?
Um, Two kids. I spent a lot of time reading to the first one, doing nursery rhymes, all sorts of reading activities. The second child, the younger child, I also did the same exact activities. There was a significant difference in how the second child responded in her ability to rhyme, the rhyming of language, reading books where the words would rhyme at the end of the sentence. The first
And
kid,
kids normally can predict what word is coming.
yeah, after reading it 8,000 times, they can predict what comes at the end of the sentence. And the second child would smush the words together. And I thought, this isn't right. Something's a bit different about this. And that problem kind of translated in preschool. I could see things. And then, of course, when kindergarten hit and she got a 16% on her Topa-Rosner test, which is phonemic awareness, I knew finally that I'd been validated. And I had been asking teachers and preschool teachers all along, and nobody really believed me.
I
But I
did.
knew you did. But no, all the people I said, oh, I was being a hovercraft mom. There was one test that was done in preschool, and it was the test, and I don't know if you can tell me what it was, where you draw the shape of a body, and the kid has to do symmetry on each side of the body. Do you know what I'm saying? It's some kind of developmental child test, and she could not do it. The arm would not line up with the other arm, the leg, it was very interesting. But that's the only test that somebody said, huh, something's not quite right here.
Right. Now, granted, your daughter has a pretty complex learning profile, and we'll do a piece on that particular diagnosis at another point in time, which will go into a great deal of depth. But I regularly have parents come in and say, I know there is something going on, and the school says there's no problem.
Right.
So we tell parents there are things that you can do to help tell your story. So, what are some of those things that we talk about? We talk about getting writing samples. Matter of fact, when we went into a meeting last week together, we brought in writing samples to say, see,
Mm-hmm.
this seventh grader should know how to spell things better than they do. Um, we brought in reading samples. So there's something called a qualitative reading inventory. You can Google it. It is
QRI.
QRI. You can Google it. Anybody can buy it. It's not horribly expensive. You do not have to buy the seventh, eighth, ninth edition of it. You can buy the second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever you can find. And the manual actually walks you through how to administer it. And it's fairly straightforward. You give a kid a passage, and you can do it very complexly or you can do it very simply. You have the kid read the passage aloud and you time them. And I highly recommend recording it and you listen for every mistake. Okay. And Kim, talk about some of the mistakes that we listen for.
The mistakes we listen for are skipping words, skipping little words, and of, the, does, said, skipping words, replacing words with different words, literally taking a word like and changing the word completely to another
Anyone
word,
to anybody, or sniff to snack, or
or acts to attacks.
right,
Literally changing the entire meaning of the story.
right. They'll
Also
also delete phonemes on words, right?
missing
So,
missing certain sounds in words.
or instead of dogs, they'll read dog,
Yeah, missing
or
the suffixes.
they'll also add it back in.
Mhm. Sometimes kids even substitute completely different words that mean the same thing as the word that they're seeing, but they're just changing it to a completely different word.
Right.
Very,
So if the word is hop, they might say jump.
yep.
That which signals to us that they're using context to guess at words that they don't immediately recognize. There's also a tendency um, for people to administer screening evaluations, not recognizing that the screening evaluations are inappropriate for a particular age group. So I had a student that was in the 8th grade that was evaluated in a school district, and the school district speech language pathologist used something called the PASS, which is a phonemic awareness early reading inventory that's free, and but it's designed for K through 2. And you sealing the test out, and so the guy was like, well, she passed it. I said, well, it's not developmentally appropriate, it's not normed for that population. But you as a parent, if you will pick that up, you can read it, you can get a sense of what the activities are. I would encourage you not to just randomly use it, but find somebody who is qualified to use it and do it if that is appropriate for your K through 2.
This
um
is the PASS test you're talking about.
yeah. Yeah. Um,
Just a phonemic awareness
yes.
test,
Yeah.
like the Tova Rosner, but going higher, higher, higher. Okay.
Yeah, it's, delete a phoneme, make a compound word, those kinds of things.
Okay.
So parents can collect their own data, listen to the reading, look at the phonemic awareness kinds of things, look at writing samples. What kinds of errors are the student making when they're writing? Are they writing very phonetically? Are they not representing all of the sounds when they write? Is their handwriting difficult to read? Do their letters float above the line? Do they go below the line? I mean, like you just see this jumble of letters going across, and spacing, like they'll put big spaces in words, but then have no space between words, or they'll just run words together. My favorite is when the words kind of run down the side of the page because they can't plan where they're writing. Um, and kids will talk about fatigue. The other part of the QRI is at the end when the kid has read the passage, and maybe we should do a sample QRI
I
for
think
one of
it's
our,
good.
yeah. When the kid has read the passage, after they've read the passage, there's a series of open-ended questions that you can ask them. There's a couple of different ways. You can do a retelling, you can ask these literal and inferential questions about the passage, and at the very end, they give you how do you calculate reading rate, so words per minute. They also do correct words per minute, where you subtract out all the errors. And they tell you whether or not your child is fluent, instructional, or frustration. If they're fluent, then they can read, the text is appropriate for them, it's within their skill set. If it's instructional, you've started to hit a point where they're making enough errors that their ability to get to the information in the text is compromised. And frustration means it's way too hard for them. And the QRI has multiple passages at like they have a bunch of first grade, second grade, third grade, pre-K passages. They also have word lists that you can have them read. And it's a way for you to see where your child is and actually give you data to come in. Now, the other place we encourage people to go, Kim, is where? If you remember from the meeting. Do you remember the
You're talking about the
data sheet I
Wilson?
provided? Wilson has that test, but school districts are also required to do progress monitoring and assessment on kids. And so school districts will often have data. So, for example, in Washington State, we have the SBAC, which is a
Oh,
standardized assessment, but a lot of people use iReady, and that iReady data can tell you quite a bit.
wait, is this something? This is not state testing. This is just the school doing its own testing.
Right. The schools, iReady is national. So schools all over the place use iReady. They also use Dibbles. All of that information is available to you as the parent, and you can look at it to see what level it's at. Now, on iReady, on the reading, there are a couple subtests where you have to score below a certain threshold or they don't administer the test. And so where it says test it out or whatever, view that with a grain of salt. So for example, the kid that we were meeting over scored 1 point above the threshold. So they didn't administer earlier tests that looked at phonemic awareness and other things. But collecting what the school is telling you about your own kid's performance. And then we also talk about taking pictures of the grade book.
What grade book?
Like in Schoology,
You want them to do that.
right, because when you start seeing inconsistency where you get A's and F's or AADD, CDA, like you see this like we also have a tendency, so some of the schools in the area that we are in will allow kids to retake tests. So if they do poorly on a math test, the kids can retake the math test and it replaces that bad grade. And so it looks like the kid is doing great because they've got all these great scores, and yet they may have retaken that math test multiple times to get the pass that they have.
I have a question. Does that iReady test and that DIBELS test, do you feel comfortable with saying that that is some accurate data?
It is. Is it accurate?
Does it reflect anything that we are interested in?
Is it as accurate as I do? No,
No.
it's not. However, if it shows that there's a problem,
You've got a problem.
you've got a problem. Like
So
it
how,
catches, I joke, it's the one that catches the apple that has fallen off the cart and has been smashed into mush and applesauce on the ground,
so then
right?
how can a school that gives these tests when a kid is in 7th grade and they score in the 2nd and 3rd grade levels of the DIBELS and iReady tests, how can they say we're continuing to give her 7th grade work when she scored? Like, I don't get it.
I don't get it either. But the problem is so large, and if you haven't listened to, for example, the podcast Sold a Story, SOLD a story, you
Yeah.
haven't listened to it, you should.
Mhm.
And it talks about how we got to where we are in reading. So in the past 40, 50 years, we've shifted away from a phonics-based system of reading instruction to this whole language approach. Matter of fact, there's a class action lawsuit now in Mississippi against this whole language approach to teaching, or not Mississippi, is Massachusetts. There's a class action lawsuit against Lucy Calkins and the people that have perpetrated this whole language approach to teaching reading because it is so damaging. So the schools have gotten used to student after student after student coming through that doesn't know how to break words down, sound them out, and blend them back together. So that is their norm, and they ignore these low
That's
scores.
insane. Yeah, the science of reading, you have to see that listen to that podcast Cindy said, because the science of reading has gone by the wayside for the last 40, 50 years. And all the spelling tests your kids are receiving, these are not teaching, these are called memorization tests.
Right.
There is no instructional value in teaching them how to sound, what these vowel sounds are, what these phonograms, I mean, there's just nothing.
Now, the irony is if you watch any of like the national spelling bees, all of those kids are learning spelling based on the science of reading. So they'll stand up there, they'll hear a word that they've never heard before, and they ask for the word origin. So they use the origin of the word to know the order of the vowels or the configuration. Is it O-R-E-R, right?
Yes.
So there's value in knowing the origins of the words. And we need to do a whole thing on structured literacy. We need to do a short video on it.
Pyramid of language.
Yeah. But so let's talk about math for a minute. When you see a kid struggling with their mad minutes, and mad minutes is how many math problems can you do in a very short period of time, right? Or when they go to do their math and their numbers don't line up and they can't remember processes, and you tell them a story problem and they can't figure out what they're supposed to do. I don't know what that means. I don't know what numbers to pull where, right? So your parent intuition, when you see things where kids are missing concepts in a way that just doesn't make sense, collect data. get your own work samples, ask for work samples
Yes.
from the teacher. Now, if you're already on an IEP where it says how frequently will you have a report of how your child is progressing in making an IEP goal, there's normally a box that says other, and you can click that box and ask for written work samples.
Do you say for once a month, every week? What do you ask for?
You ask for periodic work samples throughout the entire grading period so that you've got something to look at to say, I'm not seeing progress. Show me what you're doing towards this goal. And then you have something to look at to go back and have a conversation and say, we're not getting anywhere. But when you have no work samples and you don't have any product, it's they often don't give parents credit for having a sense of what's going on. Now, there are schools out there that are great. There are school districts out there that are very forward thinking, that are actually there. So I don't want to imply that everybody is the devil. That's not what I'm saying. But when you ask teachers what they think dyslexia is, they will repeatedly tell you it's all about flipping letters and numbers. And we know that dyslexia is not about that. It's phonemic awareness, rapid naming, and orthographic processing. But people will not understand that. And so they don't recognize these issues and how it cascades and the long-term impact. I mean, we had somebody say, all students benefit from being in above grade level, or being on grade level classes and inclusive environments. And yet, when you look at the prison system, the number of people in prison that can't read is disproportionate.
Yeah, it's there's a website called Children of the oh shoot, it's not Children of the Corn. It's
That's a
Children.
bad movie. So
Yeah, it's a bad movie. It's something like that, but basically it's scientists. There is a huge percentage, I mean, at least 50% of the people have reading difficulties in prison.
yeah,
This IEP is it's a federal law.
it's federal
It's
law.
federal money that is feeding into your school. You as a parent have the right, knowledge is power. You have the right to see the progress or lack of progress of your student in that IEP class.
Right. You also, so this parent that we went into the meeting for was pretty savvy and persistent. She's got lots of passion to get her daughter what her daughter needs. She got an independent educational evaluation at public expense. It's called an IEE. And she basically came in and said, here's why I think the data that you collected on this student is wrong. And I would like an independent evaluation. That doesn't allow the school district to go back in and repeat what they already did, but you get somebody on the outside. And we'll do another video on another time of how you find the right diagnostician, because as you've seen from some of our videos, having people that know how to nuance and look through numbers and think through the complexities of it is super important. But getting that outside independent set of eyes can be really valuable because
yeah, the purpose of a school evaluation is very different than the purpose of an outside private investigation. And no,
both are doing the same kind of assessment, but it's the school psychologists are overworked. They have way too many people on the caseload. They cannot find enough school psychologists. And the load that they have, I get it. It's overwhelming. There's too much there, the whole 9 yards. They are expediting getting things done quickly. There's a reason they keep cutting IQ tests shorter and shorter, is because school psychologists need it to be faster and faster. And when you go to a private evaluator, theoretically, they will spend the time to really get the kid through the test and try and get accurate data. And we don't want it skewed either direction. We don't want to overestimate what a kid can do. We don't want to underestimate what a kid can do. We want to really figure out what they're capable of and why, and figure out where the challenges are. But there are a lot of psychologists out there that don't believe in dyslexia either. They
Really?
think that dyslexia is a criterion cutoff, that you have to fall below the seventh percentile in reading to qualify as dyslexic.
Are
And they
you
do
taking,
not,
are these neuropsychs or these?
these are psychologists, neuropsychs. Neuropsych is an own moniker. Like there is no official neuropsych
Oh,
classification. Like you can go get additional training and specialization to be a neuropsychologist, but you can call yourself a neuropsychologist if you want to.
oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Um, and so hopefully we don't get too many comments that I've overstepped there. But so there are people out there that are not familiar with the research literature and are working on an old model, and they use a criterion cutoff. And there's a guy locally who is the hired gun for the school districts who always comes in and says, unless you fall below this number, there's not an issue. And it's like, that's not what the standard is.
He doesn't even believe in dyslexia, that it's
He
a,
does, but he thinks it's only in the most severe cases.
everybody else should just figure it out with the curriculum
Right.
given.
Well, and I'm frequently told there's no way I'm dyslexic, I'm too bright. And
There's
all you have
nothing.
to do is watch my handwriting and listen to me read a high level text, and you can totally hear it.
Yeah, I mean, there's kids with 148 IQs that have dyslexia and
Right.
dysgraphia.
Um, I'm laughing because I was reading The Giver with one of my students, and the name is Jonas, right? And I'm like, how do you pronounce that name? And the kid said, I read it this way. And I'm like, great, because I couldn't figure out how to decode it in the moment. And I was like, under pressure, I'm like, oh my God. Um, so yeah, so I'm still dyslexic to this day. I still, if you give me a novel phoneme deletion task, can't do it. You've done this with me where you try and get me to do certain phonemes and blend things and hold sounds, and I still can't do it in many ways.
Huh.
So follow parent intuition, dig deeper, collect your data, gather the data, bring it with you, and when you can, find teachers that are seeing what you're seeing and ask them to speak up. Um, because that's how we get kids help. And locally, we have an advocacy organization called PAVE that will provide advocates to go into IEP meetings with you. Now, you get varying qualities because they're all volunteers, but having another witness who is not a parent or a family member in the meeting can make a huge difference in how they handle you, if that makes sense.
You never want to go alone. Friends don't
Never
let
go
friends
alone.
go to IEP meetings alone. You
Yeah.
don't do it. You bring, is this PAVE a national organization?
No, it's just in Washington State, but often the International Dyslexia Association will have resources for advocates. LDA, Learning Disability Association, will have advocates. You can reach out to your state um, education department to see what they offer in terms of support.
Huh.
And then here's the other thing is if you go to another evaluator and they too say that there's not a problem, you may have to go to somebody who's even more specialized. I frequently get parents who've had a school evaluation, showed nothing, had a private evaluation, showed nothing, came to me. I did my thing, which is to really pull tests based on errors that I'm seeing to elicit certain behaviors. And I look under all the rocks, if you will, and I can find things that other people can't find, in part because I do dynamic assessment. What kinds of errors am I seeing? How do I isolate that error? And how do I demonstrate that in academics?
Perfect.
And if you have comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks.